So this is a subject where I got a lot of questions about. Definitely after my Film Tips Tuesday reel where I talk about overexposing film. Always wondering how people are getting these pastel looking tones, just like these. I've got you. This is Film Tips Tuesday.
Follow me on Instagram to get your daily dose of film magic.
So I thought let's make an episode about the differences between overexposing, pushing and pulling film. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk It Over. So let's do this the right way and make things clear. Overexposing, pushing and pulling film are different things and they have different results. So let's divide them in 3 different parts. But before talking about that, we have to talk about something else first. Something that is used in every exposure method. And that is the term stops. We use this term to add or distract. We use this term to add or detract light from what is coming into our cameras. To keep it simple for this episode, I would say let's do only full stops, but you can also say half a stop or even a third. A full stop doubles or halves the amount of light that we are letting into our cameras. So let's say we are at f8 on our aperture. If we then want to have a full stop of extra light coming into our cameras, we go from f8 to f5.6, which makes the lens open up more. And we can also do that with our shutter speed or ISO. For example, we go from 1/250th to 1/125th, or ISO 400 to ISO 200. All of these are one stop of extra light. Okay, quick note about that. Setting our ISO from 400 to 200 is not adding more light, but because we set the ISO to 200, we automatically go to a wider aperture or a slow shutter speed. So that's why I say it's adding more light. And I know this might be a little tricky if you are new to this, so I made a cheat sheet which is online as a free download on my website. Link is in the description. Then you can memorize it or grab it if you are not feeling sure. And once you get the hang of it, you'll be a lot more confident. So now that we know what stops are, we can talk about the differences between overexposing, pushing and pulling film. And let's start at overexposing. This is something that a lot of film shooters are using in their photography. And one of the biggest benefits from this is that you are safer or a bit safer from underexposure. Because film is very good at holding the details in the highlights, but not so much when it's underexposed. You can overexpose film by a lot of stops and still have great results. But you can also underexpose your film by 1 or 2 stops and lose all the detail in the shadows. But it's also a look, so if you are going for that, be my guest. And what I also like about overexposing your film is that you get a little bit more of that pastel looking tones. So let's say your camera or your light meter tells you that you should be shooting at f11 with a shutter speed of 1/25th and you have a 400 speed film in your camera. Then you can overexpose the scene by 1 stop. And however you want to do it, it's up to you. But in this situation, I would say let's open up the aperture 1 stop. And coming from f11, that would be f8. Lowering the aperture number, but opening the lens. A simple trick you can do is to set your ISO on your camera or on your light meter a stop lower to 200. Then you are tricking your light meter that there's a 200 speed film in your camera, while of course it's a 400 speed film. And then again you are overexposing your film by 1 stop. And then comes the question that I get asked a lot. Do you need to tell the lab that you have overexposed your film? Simple answer, no. Just let it be developed as normal. You are overexposing, not pushing or pulling the film. Here are a couple of shots that are overexposed by 1 stop. Then let's talk about pushing film. This is a technique that's used by a lot of photographers who need that extra stop of light. Most likely because they are shooting in low light situations or they just like the look that it gives. Pushing film is very popular on black and white film stocks, but it can also be used on color film. The thing is that color shifts might happen when you are pushing your film and that might not give the results that you want. With black and white film, that's not a problem, of course. But let's explain a little bit about how pushing film works. Let's say you have a 400 speed film, but you are shooting in low light situations and you need a higher shutter speed. Then we are tricking the light meter, saying that there's a higher speed film inside of the camera. I always shoot my Ilford HP5 pushed 2 stops. HP5 is a 400 speed film, so if I push it 2 stops, I need to rate the film at 1600. And this doesn't mean that my 400 speed film magically turns into a 1600 speed film. No, it stays a 400 speed film. But we intentionally underexpose it so we can push it in development, which is essentially leaving the film longer in the chemical process. Let's not get too technical about it, but this is pretty much how it works. So now I'm rating my film at 1600 so I can shoot way faster shutter speeds. For example, the scene meters at f2.8 with a shutter speed of 1/60th and the ISO was 400. But because we are acting like we are shooting a 1600 film, we are able to shoot at f2.8 and 1/250th, because we now have 2 more stops that we can use in our shutter speed or aperture. But keep in mind that your film will have a lot more contrast and the grain will be much more present, because it's raising the highlights and crushing the shadows. But I think that's a very beautiful look, definitely on Ilford HP5. And here are some black and white shots that I have pushed 2 stops. I don't really push color film, mostly because I shoot a 800 speed film and I can manage to shoot almost any situation with it. But I do have some portraits, which was on Portra 400, which I pushed 1 stop to 800. And there's a little bit of a color shift, but nothing too drastic. And it's all a look. I know a couple of people who love to push their color film even by 2 stops. But let's get back to it, because now you have underexposed your film by 2 stops. And that means that you have to tell your lab that it needs to be pushed. Most likely it's an option when you place an order, but make sure that you write it down on the roll of film. Just write down +2 or the ISO that you shot it at. And then your lab knows exactly what to do. And if all of this was way too technical for you, just remember this. Set your ISO 1 or 2 stops higher than the box speed, shoot, and then just tell your lab that they need to push it 1 or 2 stops. That's it. And then we are at pulling film, which isn't as popular as overexposing or pushing film, and it's exactly the opposite of pushing film. So this time you don't need more light in your camera, but you need less. So if your meter says we are at f8, 1/125th, at an ISO of 400, and then we need to overexpose the film by 1 or 2 stops and tell the lab that they need to pull the film. This time they are shortening the time of the chemical process in development. And now you're thinking, why would anyone do that? Because most of the time we wish there was more light than less. Well, let's say we are at the beach and it's a very sunny day and we have a 800 speed film in our camera. Then most likely the reading of the light meter will be f16 with a shutter speed of 1/1000, and of course the ISO is 800. But some cameras don't go as high as 1/1000, or you want a shallower depth of field and you don't want to shoot it at f16. Then pulling your film 1 or 2 stops is a great option. Instead of f16 you can now shoot it at f11 or f8. And instead of a shutter speed of 1/1000, you can shoot it at 1/500 or even 250. But to be honest, I never pulled my film before. Just because when it's a very sunny day, I just like to overexpose my film by 1 or 2 stops. And I also like to shoot at higher aperture numbers, so that's no problem for me at all. But I know a couple of very good photographers that are pulling their film and they have great results. But one of the most important things you need to remember is that when you are pushing or pulling your film, you need to do it for the entire roll. You can't switch it up halfway. On the other hand, overexposing can be switched up on every single frame. Now I think about it, overexposing your film is the same technique as pulling, but then forgetting to tell the lab that they need to pull it, right? But never mind, I just like to overexpose my film when it's sunny outside. So most of the time I just meter my Portra 800 at 400. But then when I encounter low light situations, I know that I have still one stop of ISO left. So then I quickly set my meter back to 800 and shoot it at box speed. And that's what making Portra 800 a very versatile film for me. And that's really it. I hope I could simplify it a bit and that it's a little bit more understandable. And if you have any questions left, please ask them in the comments down below and I will answer them the best as I can. And like I said, if you would like a cheat sheet about the stops, the exposure triangle, check out the link in the description. But for now, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching and I'll see you next week. Peace.